April the 17th, 2026. Guys, this video is about the current drought situation and the upcoming, what they're saying is a super El Nino for the summer. And so we're going to have to pay attention to it. But right now we've got a clash, kind of a late season clash of extremely cold and windy weather colliding with warmer weather. And what we're seeing is a series of tornado warnings all the way from up into Oklahoma, guys, here into Missouri, coming up into Illinois, and all the way here into Wisconsin. In this area, now the yellow areas are tornado watches, but these red dots are tornado warnings, and they're a little less than they were. I counted about 8 or 9 earlier. But this purple area, guys, these are freeze warnings. And then you got red flag warnings here. So all through the mountains of New Mexico, the northern section, and going into Utah, Colorado, and these areas, very cold, windy weather. And that's clashing with warmer, moist air that's actually been dodging our state. It's been a bubble. I mentioned this high pressure situation. The moisture's come up through Texas and Louisiana and kind of circling around. I hope that high pressure dome moves on off to the east and out into the Atlantic. But again, tornado warnings for several areas, so I want you guys to pay attention. You see the area here. And this is what the current satellite situation looks like. Again, from here coming into Oklahoma, you can see the higher clouds moving all the way up into Wisconsin. This is going to continue to move east, northeast. Now, there's a trend setting up of moisture coming in off the Pacific Ocean, and that may be a possible trend setting up. We're about to have what's called a super El Nino, and that can do a couple of different things. When you have a drought situation and you have something like what we're talking about coming up this summer, it can be a drought buster, but usually when it does that, guys, if you look back at the records, you got extreme drought somewhere and then you get an extreme flood, whether it's out in the desert Southwest or wherever it's at, and that is the drought breaker. But that can be devastating itself, so we got to be careful. What they're saying, guys, as far as the drought situation, I wanted to look at it and dive as deep as I could get and look at what we are about to experience. And what they're saying as of today, April 17th, drought conditions are widespread across the U.S., with 51% of the country and over 61% of the lower 48 states currently in drought. This represents a significant increase of more than 11% since last month, affecting roughly 148 million people. Guys, that's a lot of folks. Now, 45 U.S. states are currently experiencing moderate drought, and that's called a D1 or worse. While drought has worsened across the South, Southeast, Middle Atlantic, and parts of the West, there have been some targeted improvements in Central Texas, Florida, and parts of the Midwest. Again, that when you have these type of conditions, and then you have a record El Nino, and I mean, again, a record, possibly going back before we had records, then an El Nino can come in with a lot of moisture and a lot of heat. And the way it becomes a drought buster is it causes extreme floods in some areas. In other places, it just exacerbates the drought. They're saying the primary drivers is this unusually warm temperature, with some areas seeing departures of 9 degrees Fahrenheit up to 15 degrees above normal. Combined with the record low winter snowpack in the West, they are accelerating dry conditions. We'll have to watch the river levels and stuff like that going through the summer. The West and the Rockies, the drought is intensifying due to early snow melt and below normal seasonal totals. Severe, extreme, and exceptional drought, called a D4, remember we were looking at D1, has expanded in southern Idaho, northern Nevada, and parts of the Southwest. Conditions are particularly dire here in Mississippi and Alabama. Mississippi is experiencing its 10th driest year in history. Guys, think about that. With severe drought emerging much earlier than normal. Now, our spring, early spring, we were wet And it was kind of a mixture, but everything stayed pretty dry. But right now we are in a very dusty drought. And I talked to some of the power people a couple of days ago that were working on some lines here on my property. And they were saying it's really bad. It's getting hard for them to do much of any kind of work as far as line burial, anything having to do with digging, because the ground is so hard. And again, just like the weather's getting wild, and a lot of it is starting in the Pacific. And for our friends in Arizona and New Mexico, you keep everybody warm. It's going to be a little bit cold, especially northern New Mexico in the higher elevations, so keep the kiddies warm. It says results are mixed. While a major storm, this is in the plains, major storm system provided some relief to central Texas and Oklahoma in early April. That's that loop I'm talking about, of moisture pulling off the Gulf and the bubbles setting over Mississippi and Alabama, and everything's going up and over and back down towards Florida. But it says this extreme drought remains a threat in western Kansas and the Texas Panhandle. Guys, this is kind of where we're seeing the storms move through now. In the northeast and mid-Atlantic, moderate drought is expanding across southern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, and northern Delaware. Now, the outlook for the spring, they're talking about NOAA's Climate Prediction Center predicts drought will persist or worsen through June. Now, guys, we are still in April, then May, then June, right? Okay, across the Pacific Northwest, the Great Basin, and the Southwest, fire risk above normal. This is very important, because a couple of years ago, really not much over a year ago, there were a lot of dead trees due to pine beetles and things like that. But this fire risk is above normal. Significant fire potential is forecast for much of the southern region, including Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, as the spring dry season continues. And again, we have gone from moist weeks to very dry now. You can walk out through our driveway down towards the road there, and it's just dust. And again, that equates to the farmers across many places are thinking about plowing up their fields again, because nothing really came out. It got wet, some things sprouted, then it dried up. Their only concern about replanting is there may not be enough moisture to germinate the seeds. Now, we talked about the 4 horsemen not too long ago. So we got to be aware of that situation of drought and famine. And in all of our planning, they're saying water allocation cutbacks are already being implemented in California, specifically affecting nut crops and spring wheat production. Now, guys, we're seeing it everywhere. Let me tell you something. Here in central Mississippi, I'm kind of in the hill area, with close to 400 foot above sea level, which is not like a mountain or anything, but it's a little bit elevated. And when you see the water towers and tanks that you see in the rural areas, they're usually on the highest elevations, because once you pump that water up into there, they have so much of that gravity force pushing pressure back down out of that tank to disperse that water out into many homes and locations, right? Well, here, these towers are starting to run dry. They started it a couple of years ago. One thing that we saw was the increase in here and other parts of the state in poultry farms. Now, in the states that you're seeing an increase in the AI generation facilities, they use a tremendous amount of water, and that's draining it too. This leads to drought and famine. But water allocation cutbacks are already being implemented in California. That's going to continue to happen. Where you're getting the dried up wells, it's not going to have to be implemented. It's just going to happen. Now, I mentioned this again for a couple weeks, but they're now calling it the Super El Nino of 2026. It's expected to fundamentally reshape the U.S. drought landscape. Think about this. Acting as a drought buster for some regions while potentially worsening conditions in others. what they're saying again, you can have these massive floods in some areas while the drought continues in other areas. And it kind of goes back to the theory about rain seeding, these planes and all dropping out things to make the rain. You don't create more rain, you just move it from one location to the other. Man cannot create the most simple equation on the planet. Think about it, H2O. You got the formula, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. You have the ability to do, you see the chemicals there. We have hydrogen, we have oxygen, but no man has ever created water. You have evaporation, you have things like that, but it's pretty crazy. You think about it, H2O, but man can't do it. Only our Father in heaven can do it. And that's how he will control this situation. It says the South and the Southeast, this is a regional drought impacts because of this super El Nino. It says historically a strong El Nino brings a cooler, wetter winter across the southern tier of the U.S. Forecasters are optimistic that this could provide a major reprieve from states like Arizona, Texas, and here in Mississippi, which are currently facing severe deficits, and we are. It doesn't take long, guys, in this heat and this dry conditions for it to get bad, but let me say this one thing. We have had a spring this year. Even though it's getting a little drier now, the temperatures are more moderate. I got a feeling that's going to change. It says that the Pacific Northwest is in a worsening risk zone. Conversely, El Nino typically creates warmer and drier conditions in the north. This poses a major threat to Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, where drought emergencies have already been declared this April due to low snowpack. Guys, it looks like the world is getting ready. We're getting record droughts. The super El Nino, never before seen. They're thinking the last time it was even close to this was in the 1600s. Now, what's looking good as far as the flow of the current coming from this El Nino is the Midwest and the Corn Belt. They're saying a strong El Nino is linked to more summer rain in the Midwest, significantly lowering the risk of agricultural drought during the 2026 growing season. And that's coming from AccuWeather, guys, but that may be good news to some of the farmers. Remember I mentioned that it's been dry and they're thinking about plowing up their fields and replanting. With this outlook, that would be something for them to possibly decide upon. With the Super El Nino warning, it says current models indicate a 61% chance of El Nino emerging by June. We're in the middle of April, with a growing possibility that it reaches super status, ocean temperatures above 2 degrees centigrade. Think about that. You realize how much heat is going to be pushed into Southern California and into Mexico through the Baja, into Arizona, New Mexico, and making its way towards us. Experts warn that while Super El Nino can erase a drought, it often does so through catastrophic flooding rather than steady rain. And you got what they call temperature-driven drought. Much of the current drought is driven by record heat. Our Father told us, not by flood, but by fire. Much of the current drought is driven by record heat rather than just the lack of rain, because El Nino is expected to push global temperatures to new record highs in 2027. Guys, do you understand what I just said? New record highs. The increased evaporation may offset some of the gains from increased rainfall. Multi-year recovery. Reservoirs in the southwest and southern plains have been low for nearly 6 years. Officials emphasize that even a record wet year may not be enough to fully refill deep aquifers and major basins. And here we're going into drought, famine, all of those things that we were told was going to happen. And, guys, it's hard for me to relate to how you would deal with this in the city, because I've never been a city dweller. For a couple of months here and there, going to college, you were in an apartment here or whatever, but pretty much a country guy. I like the peace. I like the quiet. I like the room I have. I like animals. But, guys, we think about what we're talking about now is a big change coming. Record heat, record drought, and record floods in other places. So the way I feel about it is we were told there would be signs of the end times coming through the four horsemen, the drought, the famine. Now, the big question is, we know all that. What are you going to do about it? And really, the two main things that concern me, well, the main thing is the lack of drinkable water. Like I said, here, it's pretty wet. You know, you've got a lot of rivers and creeks and all, but they're going, the wells are going drier. And what's happening, we had one of these towers on our land going back about 30 years ago. Then they had to move it to over a couple miles because this well ran dry. Then they increased the production of the poultry houses and things like that. And now the new well is going dry. And just a couple of months ago, guys, our water got shut off because they had to put a smaller auxiliary well in place. And what they found out, that here, people's ponds were draining because of these new temporary wells having to be installed. They'd come out there and the next day and your pond's dry. And think about that. If you got cattle, you know how cattle get into a pond. Well, the next day you're showering in that until it runs out. I know it sounds kind of gross, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with. And so, guys, you've got to be prepared for this. You don't want to give up. You don't want to say, Lord, I can't handle it. What you want to do is be the strength. You want to be the pillars in the temple. You want to be the elect, where you find ways. You explain those ways, and when the devil pushes the hardest, you stand the tallest. Right when that flood of lies is pouring down that mountain, you get on that rock in the middle of that current, and you point up at the devil, and you say, you're a liar. Our Father has this, and the reason all this is happening is to wake people up. And what is he waking us up from, guys? That this life is temporary, very temporary. It's just a blip. If you did a line chart going over the last thousands of years, your 60, 70, 80 years is a little tiny, you wouldn't even notice it, the blip on the chart. But your eternal life is forever. It has been, you've been here forever, and you will be forever. So when you think about that, it's not about you, because you know our Father has it. But it's about now starting to wake other people up, very calmly, very passively, because our Father told us, don't hide that candle under a bushel. Don't do that. I'll take it away from you. And that candle is that you studied, you've learned, you dug deep, and you're starting to understand things, and you say, okay, I got it. I understand what the Bible's talking about. I understand the difference in Zionism and Christianity and the other things that have happened. You understand it. But if you say, okay, I've got it, I'm going to make it, you may not, guys, because he taught you that, our Father did, so that you could share it and help his other children. In other words, he knows everybody's not focused on some of these things. So he puts people in place that do focus to alert people. And so when that happens to you, don't hide it under a bushel basket, because that candle will go out. You keep spreading it, because we're talking about not immediate problems, but everlasting life. And this is how you prove to our Father that you are worthy. Remember the angels that stood against Satan? 2/3 of them fought with our Father. 1/3 of them fell with Satan. Don't be part of that. You're part of the 2/3 already. And that's a very deep video talking about the people that fought against Satan in that age, in that heaven age. They are here now. You may be one of them. Why? Because you decided at that point in your life, believe it or not, that you would not listen to Satan, that you would stand with our Father. And because you did that, he selected you now for this earth age in a physical body because he knew you were a warrior. I hope it makes sense, guys. Kind of a mixed video, I understand that. But it's time for us to realize the earth is changing. Wars are coming, rumors of wars, all of that. But your main job is to focus on what our Father is saying and then to spread that message, because right now what he needs is the same thing he needed in that war in heaven. He needs a group of angels to stand on his side. And that's why he put us from that angelic body during that war. Whether you realize the earth ages and the heaven ages or not, you will one day. But he put the people here that will fight with him here in this physical body because they fought with him in the spiritual body. That is what makes you the elect. That's why Christ said, do not touch my elect. Most of you guys listening to that are part of this group. And God bless you. May our Father touch you and your families and start bringing the light into where you can spread that light. You can take that bushel basket off of your candle and start letting people see that you know the truth. And that's such a blessing. But again, guys, this generation of the fig tree was put here because we fought in the spiritual war. And he knew that we would stand tall in this one. If we stood against the devil then and a third of the angels, we would do it right now against the Democrats and the other creatures that creep around this planet. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe. Love y'all.